Linda, you just joined us. Although it doesn't look like you're in presenter mode, let me email you the credentials.
Hey, this is Linda Kaufman.
Hey, Linda, you made it in. Good. It looked like you were muted out there. So.
Yeah, I had a little challenge because I didn't have good enough internet. So.
Oh no.
But yeah, I'm on now, so I'm good.
Okay.
All's good.
Cool. Thank you so much. And it looks like we are right at the top of the hour here, so we will get started here.
So I'm going to mute until it's time for me.
Yeah, well, you're going to come in the second half, and then I'll just briefly introduce you here at the beginning. But then when you come on, you can go into a little more detail about yourself and everything else. So, thank you, Linda. All right,
Absolutely.
everyone. So, welcome to our webinar. We've had a few minor little challenges here, but nothing we cannot overcome. You guys are all on mute right now, so the best way to ask questions, make comments, or participate is through the chat box. So I will have the chat box open, and I'm hoping that myself and my partners here will be able to actually see the comments. So I've got Cindy on the line here, but she's muted out. She's with National Coalition for Homeless Veterans. Myself, I'm Ian Listman with Advocates for Human Potential, and we also have Linda Kaufman with us. She's with Community Solutions. So the National Veterans Technical Assistance Center, which is the organization that is producing this webinar for you, is a coalition partnership between Advocates for Human Potential, that's my organization, and of course the National Coalition for Homeless Veterans, which you guys are probably all quite familiar with as well. They're an outstanding organization. So we work together, and between the two of us, we form what is known as the Center, or the National Veterans Technical Assistance Center, funded by Department of Labor, DOLBETS, Veterans Employment and Training and Services, just like you all are. So we have the same parent agency, and we work together to provide a wide variety of services, which I'll just briefly go over here. These services are provided to the HVRP grantees. That's you all listening in on this call. So we appreciate the hard work you do. All of us at the center have done this type of work and worked with veterans and veterans organizations. I myself am a veteran. I used to work with running an HVRP in the past, so I've definitely been in some of your shoes, and I know it's very challenging work and challenging reporting criteria and all the other fun stuff that we do to serve our veterans. So we provide technical assistance and training to HVRPs. This webinar would be considered a training as well. We do site visits. We'll come out to you and help you. So you should definitely know who your regional NBTAC person is. If you don't, please reach out. I'll have contact information at the end where you can reach out directly to the center. You should probably know who your person is. They can provide all types of questions. We also identify best practices and do other support. We support research and other organizations that are doing work with veterans. We've currently been working on a couple different projects with some tip sheets, a best practices suite, operations manuals, and other materials. So some of you out there at the programs in HVRPs are new. We know there's some new grantees this year, so we're going to come up with some materials specifically focused for newer grantees. That'll be coming out probably here in a couple months, probably July, August time frame. Some of you are old hands. You've been doing this for quite a while. So we have some more specialized type of training for you that would be a little bit more for those grantees and folks who have been working these programs for a while now. So we appreciate your experience and expertise, and sometimes we here at the center reach out to you and ask you for best practices, examples, success stories. So I just want to say thank you in advance for your collaboration and partnership. Lately we've been looking at some employer partnership best practices. We've been looking at grantees working with younger veterans. We've been looking at how to get additional funding streams beyond HVRP funding. So some of you may have already heard from some of our members of the center here asking for those type of things. So please respond to those requests, because we need to hear from you guys, and that way we can pass on the good work that you're doing to those newer grantees and other grantees. So like I like to tell everyone, we're kind of all in this game together. We're all working together for the same goal. That's to help our veterans and homelessness, help veterans get employment and become reintegrated and stabilized. So we respond to inquiries. So anytime you have a question, reach out to us. We can answer it. We can come up with solutions. There's a lot of unique situations, as you're probably very well aware. Doing this kind of work, it's not cut and dry. There are unique situations that arise. It happens all the time. So we do our best to respond as quickly as possible. Sometimes we run it up the chain of command. If it's something that's a gray area or simply there is no answer, we will craft a response that makes sense. We disseminate information to stakeholders. So we've got a new website that we're in the development phase. It should be live here in a month or two, I believe. Don't quote me on that though. But that's a great way so you can pass along information. A lot of time, external agencies. We've been doing a lot of work with the Veterans Administration, with their new community employment initiatives. So there's a lot of crossover. We also work with mainstream organizations, philanthropy, and other agencies outside of the government. So all those types of partnerships and stakeholders, we try to get the word out through various venues. Like I said, the new website is going to be a big way that we're going to do that. We also speak at conferences, and we're invited on other types of public speaking, public writing. We write articles for media, so there's lots of stuff out there. We also reach out to employers. We do this by reaching out to some of the national big box employers, but we also reach out to regional and local employers. Part of our website will have an employer education piece. This is a way that we can show employers, the benefits of hiring the vets. We that work with veterans and who are veterans ourselves, right, we know all the good stuff, the teamwork, the mental toughness, the adaptability, the trainability, the diversity that veterans bring to the workforce, but a lot of times employers aren't really too hip to what's going on. So we definitely reach out to them, we educate them, we show them the value-added services that our veterans bring because they have other benefits and entitlements that they bring with them to help make them better employees. So that's kind of a nutshell of what the center does, and we will move into our topic of the day, which is continuums of care. I'm going to do the first part here, and then Linda Kaufman of Community Solutions is going to talk about some of the really exciting stuff. If you don't know about their new initiatives, the new Zero 2016 initiative, and of course their previously very, very successful 100,000 homes initiatives, and a lot of these things that are directly focused on housing homeless veterans and ending veterans homelessness. So she's going to speak to that. I'm not going to steal her thunder because they are doing amazing things, and she's really very, very dedicated, and they're very dedicated to this cause. So what is a continuum of care? Now, this is something that's been around since the 90s. About 1994, it was initially under the McKinney-Vento Homeless Assistance Act of 1987, which you're probably very well aware of because it was part of the funding mechanism that allowed HVRP to come into play. The HUD created its Office of Special Needs and Assistance Programs. So that was back in the late 80s to mid-90s. Around 1994, the COC application process became much more formalized, and basically instead of having individual providers, it becomes a collaborative process. So really that's what when I like to talk about the continuum of care, I like to see it as it's a collaboration. So it's a local body, so a lot of times these will be coalitions, these will be boards that are created from a variety of different groups. Sometimes it will be one larger group. It really does vary, and as we go through the slides here, we'll get a little bit deeper down the rabbit hole as far as that. So again, it can be in a city, it can be in a region, sometimes they're in a county, but it's typically in a geographic area. And so there's a lot of different players that are now coming to the table. So this is an evolving process, and as I go through these slides, we'll kind of see kind of where it is now. I wanted to give a little bit of background just so we could kind of understand where the continuum of care came from. But really it's a planning body, it's an organizing body, it's also a funding mechanism, which is a very key and important element to consider because that's how a lot of the organizations and shelters and other homeless providers in the community actually get funded through the continuum of care. And as you can see on this slide here, VA medical centers are now coming to the table, faith-based, we're even seeing business leaders. Of course, all of these are around the homeless planning system. So the board is basically the kind of mechanism that COC is set up to operate. Typically, there's boards, and then these boards will often have committees and subcommittees. Again, there's not it's not over prescriptive the way it's organized, but the board is kind of a bare minimum, and every continuum of care will have a board. This board will have community leaders. It will have members of the local city government, perhaps county government, even state government in some cases. It will have the big nonprofits and the smaller nonprofits. It's going to have members of the business community sometimes. Sometimes it will have members of the law enforcement community, all the different players. So this board is basically going to be the kind of the venue that your organization should probably get a seat in. In the later slides here, we're going to show you how you can actually, get down to the brass tacks of actually identifying your COC, seeing who the lead organization is, and how you can actually reach out to them. Now, some of you may already be involved. The last 7 or 8 years, there's been a big push, and there's been a lot of organization, and that's no small part to Community Solutions. Linda's organization has also helped communities really think strategically and really go beyond just kind of meeting the requirements that HUD has put out under the continuum of care to make it really a robust organization that really does meet the needs of those individuals experiencing homelessness. Obviously, this is the context of veterans homelessness. The initiative by the administration to end veterans homelessness by the end of 2015 is a driving factor in this. Reaching functioning zero is another element. So HUD continuum of cares are keenly aware of these looming goals and deadlines. So yeah, getting your organization involved, getting your HVRP a seat at the table in these board meetings and committees, that's going to be one of the keys. Sometimes there's subcommittees. There could be an employment subcommittee or a veterans subcommittee. These would be a great place for program managers or even case managers to attend. This is a lot of times at these meetings. This is where they're hashing out, you know, all the way from the individual client level to systems level requirements, how the services can be coordinated, you know, how we can avoid duplication of services. A lot of times, you know, if you're in a more metropolitan area, a lot of times there's a lot of services that overlap and do some of the same things. So, you know, we don't want to waste precious resources. So this is a good way, and I will talk a little bit later about coordinated assessment and how that is definitely a good mechanism to track what you're doing in the context of what other agencies are doing. The continuum of care, as you can see on this slide here, it does vary. So some places, some cities have their own continuum of care. A lot of times it's a regional approach. Sometimes in some states, particularly those states that are relatively rural in nature, the continuum of care is actually spread out throughout the entire state. So, you know, this is not an exact science. There are a variety of players, a variety of overlapping entities that come into play here. And so as you see here in the next couple slides, I'm going to actually show you how you can identify who it is and then and how you can contact them and get involved in it. Employment programs and veterans programs need to make sure their voice is heard. I mean, this is really the point of this webinar is so you as veteran service providers and as homeless veterans reintegration programs dealing with veteran homelessness, dealing with veteran employment, you have a lot of connections, especially outside of the non-traditional homeless world. You're dealing with folks, you know, American Job Centers and workforce centers. You're dealing with state and county entities that are more employment-based. So bringing employment wisdom into the continuum of care is definitely something that HVRP grantees and those working in HVRP programs can bring to the table. And it's definitely, you know, strategically thinking long-term. This is a sustainability issue, right? Because, you know, we can only, and VA is recognizing this, HUD is recognizing this, and the field is recognizing that, okay, you know, we're coming up on you know, on eliminating veterans homelessness, but where are we going to be in 5 years, 10 years? Unless we have really providing employment opportunities for a lot of our folks, there's really not going to be a sustainability because, we're going to have new veterans hitting the system. We have current conflicts winding down. We have a lot of veterans out there over the next 5 years. I've heard a number of about 2.5 million new veterans will be hitting the system, the VA system, and of course we know a lot of those will be at risk for homelessness. And so having employment being part of the model and being part of the conversation is really going to be one of the keys for creating long-term success in the coming years. As this slide right here says, the continuums of care are always evolving. There's new players entering. There's old players that are leaving, and so it really behooves you to really make sure that your voice is at the table, that veterans homelessness is being thought about in a strategic way. And this is another great way. Now, once you're in the board and once you are attending and participating with the COC, you're going to be having access to a lot of other players in the system. There's going to be organizations that you didn't even know were out there in a lot of cases. And you're going to find out more about those organizations that you did know about. But, when you sit down and you have a face-to-face conversation with someone, you're going to learn little tricks about their programs, services that they have that you may not need, may not known about before. You're also going to learn about what's happening at a city level or what's happening at the county level. Interacting with elected officials, with members of mayor's offices and governor's offices a lot of times. So this is going to give you access to decision makers and planners at a much higher level. So again, making sure that the veterans' perspective and employment voice is heard is great, but you're also going to be able to have to really learn a lot more about what's going on and to really educate those folks that may not know a whole lot about. A lot of times the homeless provider world and the employment world are kind of two different areas, and we've seen this a lot of the field work we've been doing as we're trying to implement more employment options, that a lot of times there's not a lot of understanding about what programs can do for homeless clients or for at-risk clients, particularly veterans who are looking for work. So that's where your expertise can bring to the table and say, hey, here's what we can do. Here's what services we can do, and guess what? Here's what we can't do. A lot of times partners get confused about eligibility, all the good stuff that we know as good HVRP staff that we understand all this stuff fairly well, but a lot of times community organizations are really out to lunch and don't understand. So this is going to get you into the kind of the how-to. This is the nuts and bolts parts I was talking about. So there's a website listed there at the top. It's a HUD Exchange website / so it's www.hudexchange.info/COC. I forgot to mention earlier that this webinar is being recorded, and it will be placed on the website for the National Coalition for Homeless Veterans. They've got a gateway, and then once the NVTAC, the center new website is up, it will probably be posted there as well. So you'll be able to get this information afterwards, but take a screenshot or jot it down now, especially if you do not know who your COC is. This is very key. Once you go to that web page, there'll be a little kind of a menu. I'm not looking at the web page right now, so I'm just doing this from memory. But up in the right, there's like a little kind of side menu with 4 or 5 topics, and I think the second one is Contact a COC. Just go ahead and click on that link. Once you click on that link, there's going to be 2 drop-down boxes. One is going to have state or territory, because there's also territories served. I believe Puerto Rico is on there, District of Columbia. So there's so select your state or your territory, and then select another little drop-down box underneath that has all the different types of organizations that are listed. I always just click on all, because if you click on COC only, sometimes it won't pop up. So just go ahead and click on all, and then click Update. At that point, the screen will refresh, and there will be a little list of all the different continuums of care and other agencies that are working in that state. So look through there, and like I said before, if you're in a rural state, if you're in a South Dakota, for example, they only have a balance of state, which means they have one continuum of care, and that covers the whole state. So there's only going to be one organization listed there. If you're a very dense area, there may be more than one in your city. So you'll have to see, maybe contact both of them if you're Los Angeles, for example. Now, most of the medium and bigger sized cities are going to have either a regional continuum of care or one that actually serves their city only. So again, it does vary by location. So click through and see what makes sense. And there might be more than one. Click on more than one, and it's going to list what the actual organization is. A lot of times it will be somebody that you know. Sometimes it may be somebody you've never heard of. So again, it's going to vary depending, and it will also list a lot of times who the point of contact is. There's going to be an HMIS, which is the Homeless Management Information System, which is the way that continuums of care track their clients, and it's also the way that they count the homeless. There'll be a lead person for that too. I think most of you are probably at least generally aware of what the HMIS is. So we're not going to go. That's another webinar entirely that we'll do at a later point. So I'm not going to kind of go down that rabbit hole, as it were. But just be aware that there's certainly going to be somebody listed there, and then you can, if there's not a person listed there, you can just Google the organization, get their contact information. So what does all this mean? Well, so this, last year and this year's solicitation for the continuums of care, there are now outcome employment measures. So the employment outcomes are relatively new. So measure 4, got it listed here, and this is, income and employment. So a lot of times, as we know, as HVRPs, we try to get folks jobs, right? But sometimes we have to refer folks who are no longer able to work. to VSOs and get them benefits. So that's what the kind of income growth means in the context of veterans. But for you all, and for HVRP grantees, this is really thinking about employment. So increase the percent of adults who gain or increase employment or cash income over time. So this is where you can leverage the services and the expertise that you have into the COC. So let's, when you contact your Continuum of Care organization, and they're all over the board. Some of them are very top-notch, really go-getting, very knowledgeable, very expertise, well-rounded organizations, and some of them are not so much that way. So, depending on what's going on in your area, you can bring a lot to the table. Say, hey, we can help this employment outcome measure, right? We're, HUD is measuring how many, where people are starting and where they're exiting, and we'll actually go to the next slide where it actually shows the different metrics. And this is just to give you a sense. This isn't anything that you need to memorize or really understand, but you can just see all these different metrics here that are measuring changes in employment for folks who stay in the system, for folks who exit the system, and this is all going to be your bread and butter as far as you already track your wages for your clients. Your goal is to get folks, jobs and for them to increase their earnings. So the simple fact that your organization is already doing this is going to go dovetail right in to the Continuum of Care goals. So when you come to the table, say, hey, we're tracking this. We already know which of our clients are getting jobs. We already know who in the system, which of our homeless veterans are getting some benefits, and things like that. So this is going to really, make you a desirable partner, because not only are you educating them on what's out there and how to help veterans, at risk and homeless veterans get employment, but you're also actually doing the work that's getting them, and that's going to help the continuum as a whole to reach their metrics, to reach their goals of employment. So this is a really good thing to think about when you're moving forward and when you're starting to connect with and starting to work with your COC. You can kind of bring that to the table as like, hey, look, we know that you have to track employment, guys, and guess what? We're doing that. So that's helpful to them, and it's helpful to you because you're going to get new resources. You're going to get new partners to help do this very, very hard job of getting veterans employed and housed and out of homelessness. So in the previous slides, we showed you kind of how the process to go through and how to find what the actual organization is. So once you do that, then yeah, you've got to contact them. And they may have a variety. For example, I'm in Colorado, so in Denver, the COC here has an actual format where you can actually go in and request technical assistance and contact. But contact them and have a conversation and say, so what do you guys have as far as committees around veterans, and what do you have as far as subcommittees or committees, board members that are thinking about employment? Typically, they're going to probably have at least a monthly meeting, and depending on how robust they are, there may be more. There may be multiple meetings. There may be multiple boards and committees. And if they don't have it, this is a great time where you can say, hey, maybe we need to have a committee that's just specifically talking around veterans or employment, or even veterans employment, if you can get that specific, although typically just having a veterans committee and having an employment committee are going to be really the way for you to get more bang for your buck, because, that's your expertise, that's your focus, and there's a lot of organizations out there that are going to have a similar focus. So we're going to also talk a little bit about coordinated assessment, because that's the last kind of bullet point here on how to engage. And it's definitely something that the continuums of care are compelled to do, and that's not the only reason. And it's really, it makes sense. Coordinated assessment, in general, it's a way that everyone's working together and understanding what resources are out there. It's a way that we understand if a client, if a homeless veteran presents that one organization or walks into a service provider, that they're going to be assessed in a way that is going to identify their needs for the whole system, not just because, okay, we're X organization, we only provide Y and Z, so we can't help you. Coordinated assessment, you're going to say, it doesn't matter if they need A, B, C, or X, Y, Z service, you'll be able to utilize the coordinated assessment system to direct that veteran to the appropriate agency that can provide them with exactly what they need. It's also a way that we're able to work together better. We're able to communicate. If we have a good release of information in place between other organizations or between members of the continuum of care, we can freely talk about. We've got client Mr. Jones. Mr. Jones needs X, Y, and Z, and then you've got somebody else sitting at the table that can say, hey, he just came into our office last week. We helped him with this and that. So you can get a better sense and have a team-based approach. So these are, as you can see on the slide here, this is the access. So the access is, where they enter the system. Now, some places there's a centralized access in some communities where you have to go through a certain agency. Others are multiple points of entry. If you can come in to one place on one side of town, or you can go into another place in another area of town, and it doesn't matter which physical door you walk through. You're getting into the system. There's street outreach teams that are using mobile data entry to get people into the system. And this is where your homeless management information system, your HMIS, does come into play, because this is where we're initially trying to find how people can access the system. Assessment, same thing. We're looking at a standardized assessment procedure, right? If you've got one agency that doesn't ask if they're a veteran, guess what? You're not going to capture that individual as a veteran. So this is like coordinated assessment, and you notice the assessment is also called coordinated entry and other things, but the assessment is really one of the big bonus points to this, because if everyone is using universal tools and asking the same questions, there's going to be some consistency. Back in the bad old days, everyone had their own form, and some people were asking some questions, other people were asking other questions. And this is a great place where you're going to get employment questions. As part of that assessment, are you working? A lot of times we find a lot of homeless individuals are already working, and so maybe we can help them get a better job, or maybe they want to work, but they need to have some other barriers addressed. This is where the coordinated assessment really shines. Referral, and again, this is not just hand somebody a slip of paper and say, here you go over here. This is really a warm handoff. This is an integrated referral process where we're not giving our clients a runaround, right? We know a lot of times that if you give someone a referral and it's a bad referral, you send them someplace and that place is no longer there, or they're closed, or it's not appropriate, they don't serve that person. You're only going to be able to do that maybe once or twice with a client before they're going to be done with you. So having a coordinated assessment system means having an intentional referral process that makes sure that folks aren't getting the runaround, that clients are really getting to the place where they need and where that's open, that exists, that they have access to, and that they're getting the right service. This also reduces, like I said before, the issue of duplication of services. So where do you guys come in? Where does HVRP come in? The slide here says, do we need to participate in the design, planning, and implementation of coordinated assessment? Yes. And this is where you can bring to the table. These are the types of questions we need to be asking. Are they signed up for the workforce center? Are they looking for work? That way, you're not going to have folks coming into an employment system who can't or won't or don't want to employment, right? We're not going to sit there and spend an hour with a client and have them develop a resume if they can't work, or if they won't work, if they don't want to work. For the majority of our clients, we found employment of some sort or fashion, even if it's part-time, is going to make them have a much better quality of life. They're going to feel better. So most clients we talk to will want some type of employment, but making sure that the coordinated assessment does have employment elements, and of course identifying veteran elements, right? We want to make sure, and pretty much across the board, I think most of the HMIS, most of the management and intake forms do ask the veteran question, did you wear the uniform? Have you served in the military? Those type of things. So, as an HVRP grantee, you can help these tools become more nuanced. Maybe look between, are they a member of the Guard or Reserve? Do they serve in active duty? Discharge status, right? Because we know just because you wore the uniform doesn't mean you're eligible. If you've gotten a dishonorable discharge, that means that they're not really going to be eligible for a lot of veteran-specific services, although, that's, again, where the COC's coordinated assessment can shine. It happened to me all the time running an HVRP that you get someone coming in there, hey, I served, Vietnam, whatever, and they something bad happened and they got kicked out. Well, they're not eligible, but we need to be able to have a good referral system and a good a way so that client's not just falling through the cracks. Guess what? That individual did wear the uniform and serve their country, and due to bureaucracy, we may not be able to help them directly, but we should certainly just not let them fall to the wayside. So this is why HVRP participation, in the design of coordinated assessment is really key. And I think I'm talking past my time, but we're pretty much right on time. So how do you how do you do this? We basically already kind of covered this. You make sure that you contact your COC representative in your area. You ask where they are in the planning, and this is not a static thing, right? This is not something where it's say, nope, we got it all figured out. Guess what? Game over. I guarantee you, no continuum of care has it locked down that tight. There's always new resources coming to bear. There's new guidelines. There's new programs, and there's new ways of thinking. Like I said, Linda's organization, Community Service, they've been leaders in the field, helping communities really think about ways to make this work and to have this kind of sense of continuous improvement. Where you say, okay, we've reached a benchmark. Now let's take it to the next benchmark. Let's do it a little bit better. So there's three kind of elements. The access element, and again, this can be a virtual or physical. It typically covers the entire area of the continuum of care. So anybody in the COC, again, if you're in a more rural area where it covers your whole state, that's going to be having an electronic assessment and a way to communicate with other agencies is going to be key. As you know, those folks who've done work in the rural areas, veterans are out there and there's no services, right? So when we contact them out there, it behooves us to make sure that we're plugging in with everything that's out there. A 211 system, that's your local, and not all communities have it, but that's where folks can call for housing assistance. You want to make sure that, again, it's asking those questions. Are you a veteran? Are you looking for work? The assessment phase, that's the same thing. We're using a comprehensive tool. Like I said, most communities are already using something like this, but this is something that can also be tweaked. Coordinated entry is going to be it's going to be mandatory. And for the most part, most communities are already on board with this, but it's definitely a time when an HVRP grantee can really come in there and add their knowledge and make sure that the veterans and employment issues are being addressed. Referral, we kind of already talked about this. A lot of times it's memorandums of understandings. There's standards that we have. So some programs that are HUD-funded programs are going to have certain standards, and it behooves you as Department of Labor grantees to kind of understand the nuanced differences, which you've probably come up across that, particularly when you're dealing with VA grants, VA programs, SSVF, for example. They've got different definitions, and so having an understanding, and ultimately, this is really about communication. Talking to the other members of your COC. Really to kind of integrate what HVRP is doing into the COC's coordinated assessment and their whole service bundle. What can we do to help? How can we make sure that when folks come through our program doors, they come into HVRP to make sure that we're making a good handoff if they're not eligible for our services, and really making sure we're doing a full assessment. And then going back to the earlier portion of these slides, helping the continuum meet its employment goals. A lot of times homelessness is thinking about employment as an afterthought. They're not thinking about employment strategically or up front. So this is where you can kind of really bring your voice to the table and really, help them understand. So that's kind of just been, a very broad overview, but giving you some very also specific ways to really identify who your COC is and how you can really just connect with them and bring something to the table that's useful. So I want to make sure I leave enough time for Linda here, so I'm going to pass it off to her.
Okay, thanks so much, Ian. That was great. Getting involved with your COC is going to be absolutely essential, and making sure you're part of a coordinated effort in your community. If you could go to the next slide. Or can I control my slides? Thank you. So this is a question we asked.
For you, so sorry about that.
Okay, thanks. No, that's fine. So this is a question we asked communities last summer at the National Alliance to End Homelessness Conference. Are you ready for zero? And we had a lot of conversation with communities about whether they were really ready to get to zero, which is a functional zero for veteran homelessness by the end of this calendar year, and functional zero for chronic homelessness by the end of 2016. Next slide. So functional zero means that you know how many people you can get housed every month, and there are never more than that many people on the streets of your community. So that homelessness is brief, it is rare, and it is non-recurring. So that's the intent in communities when they get to zero. So I like to put this in. This is a guy named Ed Gibbons who lived for 30 years on the streets of Skid Row in Los Angeles. We did this assessment just like Ian talks about with every person who would talk to us on Skid Row, and we had by doing that we were able to triage and decide the people with the highest acuity, who were the most vulnerable, would get into housing first. And Ed very quickly moved to the top of the list. And so when he got to the top of the list, he got the next available housing, which really basically that's all that housing first is. It means that you have a by name prioritized list in your community. When the person gets to the top of the list, the next available housing that they qualify for, like veteran housing or whatever, they move in. And after he'd been in housing for for a month or so, he said to his case manager, listen, I feel terrible all the time. If I drink, I feel like I'm going to get sick. If I don't drink, I feel like I'm going to get sick. And he asked that amazing, wonderful question, can you help me get into detox? And she did. She got him into detox. And a couple of months later, you can advance the slide, a couple of months later, this is what he looked like. And that's what we're looking for in every community, is that you find the people with the highest acuity, get them into housing, and allow them to get their lives back. But to be really clear, Ed Gibbons got clean and sober. Ed Gibbons got his life back because he had a place to live. Okay, next slide. We've been working on, housing the Ed Gibbonses of the world for about 5 years now, but the difference that is going on now in communities all over the country is that we have committed to end veteran and chronic homelessness, not just to reduce it, not just to get a few people housed, but really to end veteran and chronic homelessness. Next slide. And as we move toward that commitment to end homelessness, we have to make sure that everyone understands that about 90% of the people who move using Housing First, the way we just talked about with Ed Gibbons, 85 to 95% of them are able to sustain themselves in housing. Not by themselves. They get a lot of support. They get wraparound services. they get consumer choice on where to live and what kind of apartment, and we do everything we can to support people in housing, and 85 to 95% of the time they make it. And that's the same as mainstream tenancies. So that if a landlord says to you, oh, these people who move off the streets don't make it in housing, you can very winsomely say, actually they have about the same, successful tenancies as mainstream tenants. Next slide. And here is what's been really exciting is that, as Ian said, there's a lot of collaboration going on. In communities, you're going to want to collaborate, but at the federal level, HUD, the VA, the U.S. Interagency Council on Homelessness, they are all working together and saying, we can do this better if we work in collaboration. Next slide. So the mayor's challenge, the Zero in 2016 goal, and Opening Doors, which is the federal plan to end homelessness, all came up with the same goals, which is that in 2015 we will end the veteran homelessness, and building on that momentum, in 2016 we will end chronic homelessness. Okay, the federal plan pushed that out an extra year, so they've decided 2017. But Zero 2016 in our communities and communities all over the country are deciding, let's do veteran homelessness this year, chronic homelessness next year. So it's been an amazing thing to watch the confluence of Zero 2016, the mayor's challenge to end veteran homelessness, and the federal plan all come together. Next slide. So I wanted to spend a few minutes talking with you about what we learned when we did a self-assessment for the communities that participated in the 100,000 Homes campaign. We surveyed almost 100 communities, and we found out there are actually a handful of things that if your community is doing these things, you have a much better chance of reducing and ultimately ending homelessness in your community. Next slide. So the first thing, I'm going to go from the kind of least important to the most important. So the number 5 thing that you want to do in your community to be on track for ending homelessness is to implement a concrete plan to tap into mainstream funding. And what I mean by that is we have in our country set-asides for ending homelessness. We have shelter plus care. We have permanent supportive housing, and those are really creative, very flexible resources. They're also about 1% of the housing subsidies that are available in this country. So we cannot end homelessness with homeless set-asides. So we have to figure out how to get into the mainstream resources, such as the housing choice vouchers. Your housing authority has access to many more resources for housing than the homeless numbers. Your VA has access to resources. So we want to make sure through housing resources, maybe through the emergency solutions grants, which are block grants, or the community development block grants, the CDBG. Make sure that you're using your mainstream resources strategically to reduce homelessness. It's essential. If your community is an expansion state for Medicaid, make sure that your plan, if there's an amendment to your state plan for Medicaid, make sure it includes keeping people in housing. Next slide. So the next thing, I kind of like that data is sexy, because I think that we have to use data for everything that we do. And to me, this number 4 is summed up by saying we are only going to pay for things that actually work. And when I say work, in my arena where we're talking about ending homelessness for veterans, ending homelessness for chronically homeless people, the only thing that really matters to me is that someone gets into permanent housing and is able to stay there. That's the only outcome I care about. Sorry, I'm a little bit narrow on that, I know. But I want in your community that you only pay for things that work and that you use evidence-based practices. So things that you can show reduce homelessness, things that have been shown nationally to reduce homelessness. Put your energy and your resources into that. Next slide, please. So if you thought that was a little bit in your face, I'm going to get really in your face now. So here is what we asked. What we found in communities is that setting eligibility criteria and deciding who gets permanent supportive housing in your community needs to be made at the community level, not at the provider level, so that individual providers don't do their own case finding, they don't have their own waiting list. That instead, your community feeds in all the information from the assessment that Ian was talking about. So all that goes into HMIS or another database, and you have a prioritized by name list in your community, and you know when housing becomes available. So at a community level, you match up the person with the highest acuity with the next available housing, not at the provider level. So that's going to be really, really important for communities that want to end homelessness. So next slide, please. And this is implied in what Ian said, what I've been talking about is that you have a by name prioritized list of your homeless neighbors. So you should have, just as an emergency room has a triage list there that says what order we are going to offer services to people who came in with medical emergencies. In your community, you're going to have a by name prioritized list that tells you this is the order in which people are going to get housing, because the people with the highest acuity need to get in quickly. This is not a static list. It's not a number like you got from your point in time in January of every year. This is a list that's constantly being updated when someone shows up at one of the entry points in your system, or an outreach worker finds someone who needs to have services. So you need a continuously updated, prioritized list of homeless neighbors. Next slide. And this is the number one thing that will influence whether your community is on track to end homelessness, is that you're implementing Housing First on a system-wide basis. And it's the most important thing. We would not have been able to reduce veteran homelessness by 33% in the last few years, except that the VA has pushed us to use Housing First. And I'm going to remind you what Housing First is. I started with that with Ed Gibbons. Housing First simply means that there are no prerequisites to housing, so that when you get to the top of the prioritized list, you get the next available housing. And it means that you're going to move people into housing while they're still drinking. You're going to move people into housing while they're smoking crack. You're going to move people into housing while they're still floridly psychotic. And you are going to be there in their apartment visiting them every day in the beginning. And you're going to be working winsomely with every person who's moved in using Housing First. But it's the only way we are going to end homelessness, is using Housing First at a community-wide basis. Okay, next slide. So in order to do those 5 things that I've just talked about, the mainstream services and following the data and making decisions community-wide and having the by name list and Housing First, you have to get the right players at the table. And this is, I'm going to repeat what Ian just said. You need to have the COC there, the Housing Authority needs to be there, and the VA and the VA service organizations all need to be at the table. We cannot end homelessness if one of those partners takes their football and goes home. We have to have all 3 at the table. And others, of course, you have to have other service providers. You may find that in Washington, D.C., Tom Nermi and the William S. Abel Foundation are hugely important in ending homelessness. And the Abel Foundation is involved in many meetings. So you may have a funder like that in your community who's essential to make this happen. So but this is the foundation on which you're going to be able to end homelessness. Next slide. This is my dream. is that every provider in this country expands their vision to look at this man on the street and say, you know, with the foundation of housing, we don't know what all we could do for the Ed Gibbons of the world. But I think that when we make that step and say, you know, we're going to do housing first. A community called me a year and a half or so ago and said, we want to be a high-performing continuum of care. We agreed as a community that we would do housing first. And then they kind of giggled and said, but we don't really believe in housing first. So could you come down here and, first of all, could you convince us it's the right thing to do? And then secondly, could you train us how to do it? So, you know, it seems impossible when you look at somebody like Ed Gibbons on Skid Row and you think, this guy will never make it. But he did. Next slide. So at the end of the 100,000 Homes campaign, we were really honored to have the White House invite us over for the celebration of the end of the 100,000 Homes campaign. And that's Ed Gibbons at the White House celebrating the end of the 100,000 Homes campaign with me. I had talked about Ed Gibbons, honestly, 1,000 times, and I got to meet him at the White House a year ago. And by the way, that was a fashion statement, but it was also a bet that I made that when we hit 100,000, I said I would shave my head. So that's me with a shaved head. But when you think about doing this work to end veteran homelessness, I want you to keep in mind the fact that the impossible can be done if we follow the data, if we use evidence-based practices, and if we just work our butts off to make this happen. Next slide. So I want to get really personal. I am fiercely committed to ending homelessness. And I think we can do this. Next slide, please. So every time I'm with a group of people, and I happen to be at a veterans conference today, and I have a whole bag full of little plastic toy soldiers. And I give a toy soldier to everyone who seems at all interested in ending veteran homelessness. And I ask them to take that toy soldier home and put it someplace in their home or at their office where they'll see it all the time. And every time they see it, I want them to look at that toy soldier and say, I am committed to ending homelessness starting with veterans. So do that in your community. Go to the Dollar Tree, buy a bag of little toy soldiers. They're 30 toy soldiers for $1. So go get a bag of these, hand them out to the people who are working in your community to end veteran homelessness, and then commission them. I mean, I commission you to be commissioners. So go out and tell them, next slide, tell them to pick up their veteran, take it home with them, put it someplace they'll see it, and make them stand up and hold up their veteran, their toy soldier, and then say, by the power vested in me, I commission you to go out and work your butts off to end homelessness, starting with veterans. I really think that we need to not only know the things to do with the COC, with the who to get at the table, what the things are, but we also have to stir people's hearts if we're going to do this work. So I encourage you to find ways to get your, you can go to the next slide, to get your leadership in your community stirred up. Because this is the question we each have to answer. Are you ready for zero? Are you ready to take your community to ending veteran homelessness by the end of this year and ending chronic homelessness by the end of 2016? Next slide. And that's my contact information. Take a screenshot of that. Call me, email me. I'd love to talk with you. The time to enter the Zero 2016 is over, but it doesn't mean you can't do the work. So, Ian, thank you for giving me time to talk with folks, and I just took every minute of the time we had, didn't I?
That's all right. That's all right, Linda. It's awesome. And just so everybody out there knows, I have my toy soldier. I was in a group meeting a couple months ago in D.C., and Linda was there, and she gave me one. And I have it with me. I brought it with me to Denver. I have it sitting here at my work desk at my office. So,
all right. Thank you.
I thank you, Linda, for your dedication, your enthusiasm, and you're very inspiring. So appreciate everything that you've done and everything that you're doing. It's leaders like you that are really making this happen. So I didn't get any questions and answers from the group. So, and I think our time is basically up here in 1 minute. Take down Linda's information. I'm just going to go to the slide that has the center's information. So do a print screen or jot that down if you can. You can always Google Linda, find her community solutions.
I'm easy to find.
Yeah, she's easy to find, as am I. So there's the big one there is the NBTAC at ahpnet.com. That just gets to our general email. Also, my email is down there. I take care of the Dallas region, but I will answer anybody's question or pass you along to your representative if you want a site visit. I list them in at AHPNet. Again, I'm pretty easy to find. I want to thank everybody for all the hard work you're doing. It's not easy work. It's challenging, but we are definitely making a difference. The number of homeless veterans is coming down. Unemployment among veterans is dropping, and it's thanks to people like Linda doing her work at the community level and at the national level, and to folks like you do that work directly with the clients every single day. I appreciate you. Thank you for your help, and thanks for participating and coming to our webinar, everybody. Have a great Memorial Day. And maybe think about those who lost their lives, on this time of reflection. So thank you so much, everybody. Have a great weekend.
All right. Bye-bye.
Thanks, Linda.